Ryvelations is truly one of the Ashes of Creation podcasts of all time. Thomas Edison.
That's it. There we go. Okay. I think we have it all set up now. There's always a few things. I've only done this a few times with a guest on here, so I'm trying to get it all learned. I reached out to you because I noticed you in the Node Wars live stream, and I remember the name, and I was like, man, where do I remember that name? And I looked on YouTube, and I was like, man, I used to watch that guy's videos when he did Ashes videos, and early on when I started following Ashes, I've followed it since the very beginning, but not like super close. But you were one of the ones I watched, and I was like, well, I would like to talk to somebody that was in the Node Wars test that other people have not talked to yet, because a lot of people have been interviewing DA from MVS and all the other people. And so I didn't know if you would be interested, and you said you were, and we're glad to have you here. First off, I guess I was going to pull up my show notes so I could be on track. But the main thing I wanted to talk to you about was obviously the Node Wars, but I also kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about your YouTube. And are you planning to eventually get back into that a little bit, or why did you take a pause in that?
Gotcha. Cool. Where do you want me to start?
I guess start with the YouTube, and will you be coming back on that? Can we coax you into coming back to YouTube, or have you been waiting for an actual game to play? Is that why we haven't seen you?
It's more with the latter. So it's because I mean, we were doing that from the Ashes podcast for quite a while before, and we just ran out of stuff to talk about at the end of the day. Like we talked about as much as we could, and then it came to a point where the development wasn't really keeping up with what we could kind of share and talk about. So we're just kind of like, we should probably, call it quits for now. And then I had started that channel kind of thinking there would be a little bit more to talk about, but at the end of the day, just kind of ran out of content. And then I didn't want to really, continue to try and squeeze it kind of based on that. So, so the plan eventually would be maybe to do content again once the game is in, I would say, like a late beta stage, more towards release. And then I would probably consider doing it. But before then, almost definitely not.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I started kind of my YouTube channel after Alpha 1, after Hype had completely died, and it's been a long journey to get some kind of viewership. But now that the game is actually almost here, I'm excited for that. At least some kind of game. I know it's not fully fleshed out by any means, but
yeah.
What originally kind of brought you into Ashes? Was it you were there from the Kickstarter days, I assume? Did you join PI during Kickstarter, like very early?
Yes. So I wasn't one of the, I'd say I was one of the first, but I wasn't one of the absolute first. Like when they first started the Kickstarter, there was, I think, like maybe 10 or so. I forgot what the actual number is. I'm not going to quote it, but there was a very small number of PI, and then it was probably a month or two in it, I think, that I was finally like, all right, I'll go ahead and bump up my monetary value, monetary contribution, and then jumped into PI, and then eventually, went to, as highest as I could go. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
And for me, it was I had already backed Camelot Unchained and Crowfall and EverQuest Next, and I was kind of burnt out from all those. And
yeah,
I looked at Ashes, and I was interested, and I played ArcAge, so I was definitely interested in the concept, but I just had a little bit of fatigue from Kickstarter back then. But I eventually did back when they launched Alpha One pack sales again on their website, so I could get into Alpha One,
nice.
and that was enjoyable. Out to get into Alpha One. Alpha One was rough, but I've definitely followed the game closely ever since then,
Yeah,
and it's been a fun journey. It's been a long journey for you. Obviously, it's been an extremely long journey. um,
yeah, yeah.
what originally brought you into Ashes? What other MMOs had you played before that?
Yeah. So I got my start in. So are you familiar with what MUDs are?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So I got my start in this really obscure mud called Nanny Mud. It was made by these students at this university, Lister University, in I think it's Sweden. I forgot which one. Anyways, they use this kind of mud, to better their programming and stuff like that. So back in the day, I think it was it 90s or something like that, when somebody was like, "Hey, there's a graphical mud coming out," and it was Ultima Online, right? It was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
the graphical equivalent of what you could actually play, and that's where I got my start. It was playing Ultima Online, and it was through there that they had. For those of you who aren't familiar, the system that they had was you could basically kill anyone at any time, build your own world type thing, and the way that they tried to handle that was through this notoriety system. So you would go red, you would accumulate karma, if you will, or I forgot what they called it at the time, but you would accumulate karma, if you killed people or did bad things like steal, and then you would accumulate good things if you did, or what is it, positive karma if you did good things. So you could become a great lord or a dread lord. Like there are two opposite kind of, ways for it. So did that for a longest time. That ended up dying, and then myself and a whole bunch of other like PvPers, migrated to games. So we migrated to like EverQuest because EverQuest was the next thing. And then, from there was God, I keep like Asheron's Call. I think it was the
Oh
next
yeah.
one.
I
And
played
then
that one.
Asheron's Call 1. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. That came out. And then we started bouncing between games. Like one of the other ones, I think the last like major game that we had bounced to was this game called Shadowbane, and we
Mm.
did that for a while, thinking that
Yeah.
that was going to be the next thing. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, thinking
Yeah.
that that was going to be the next thing. And
Yeah.
so a lot of us after Shadowbane kind of fell off, just kind of went our own separate ways from that. And we joined things like ArcAge, and jumped into various MMOs here or there. But then that's when I learned about Ashes, kind of a couple years ago when it came up, and learned about the concept, what they were trying to get at. Heard Steven talk. It's like, this actually sounds pretty good. Um, from my perspective, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about this, but one of the more interesting and hard things that I think that Ashes has coming for it is balancing uh, keeping people around in a war type game, right? In a game where there is naturally conflict. So I'm curious of how they're going to approach that, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But that's what got me into the game, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long road. A lot of us, I think, had that road. My first kind of MMO that I really got into was Dark Age of Camelot.
Mm,
And so I've
yeah.
constantly been searching for that next Dark Age of Camelot, and it's never came. I've liked Arc Age and Lineage 2, those sort of MMOs as well, but not quite as much as Dark Age, at least the concept of Dark Age. And so that's
Yeah.
why I was really, really excited about Camelot Unchained. Of course, it's not working
Ah,
out. So that's
yeah.
the
Yeah.
main reason probably why I'm here and so excited about Ashes, because it is showing huge progress, and that got me into it.
Yeah.
The Node Wars, I have a lot of questions, as you can see on the
Oh, yeah.
document about that. But overall, how much were you in every test? Did you enjoy it? Obviously, I'm assuming you enjoyed it. It seemed like everybody enjoyed it that was in it. Were you able
Yeah.
to do all 6 tests? Was there anything that stood out to you?
I did about 4 of the tests. So yeah, yeah. So based on the timing, yeah, I just couldn't make all of them. It's kind of tough based on some of the timing that they have. But Yeah, I was in them. So overall, my feedback was pretty positive, right? So, um, and by positive, I mean, just to give you guys a little bit of background, I'm a product manager, so I create specifically a digital product manager. So I'm used to the software development cycle. I know and understand kind of where, how software is developed, how software is made, how games are made for that matter, and then the process that comes into it. So I'm kind of looking at it from the lens of a product manager expecting certain things to be the way that they are at certain times, right?
Yeah.
With that said, it's rough. It's extremely rough in terms of like,
Yeah.
don't don't look at it or go into
Yeah.
the game thinking that this is something that you can play end to end. That's not what this is. This is, I know Steven said it ad nauseum, but it's a true alpha in that. And for good or for worse, they're exposing it to the public basically in this whole development cycle. So from that perspective, that's why I'm positive for it, with the understanding that it's extremely rough right now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it sounds like they
yep,
really limited you to just Node Wars. There wasn't much else you could do. But
yeah,
obviously, you guys have done some other tests, but that is still all under NDA. Um, what
yeah.
archetype did you play mostly? Did you stick with one the whole time, or did you change it up?
I got two. I went through two. Actually, did I go through all of them? I think I'm forgetting one of them that I went through. I definitely went through. I No, it's warrior that I or tank that I did not go through. So I didn't play tank. I played mage, and I mostly played the ranger archetype, basically. Um, but although the last one during the actual node wars, I was mage. So yeah, it was mainly between mage and ranger, basically. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Did you have a
yeah.
preference between those two, or
You know, uh, I really liked Ranger just because. So to their credit, I liked how they kind of at least they got the like remapping of buttons like correct and things like that. So I was able to map the buttons the way that I liked it and was pretty quickly able to pick up things so that it wasn't really rough. I had everything mapped to where I needed it, kind of memorized things. So I liked the way that the Ranger played a little bit more, I think, than the Mage. The Mage felt a little bit I don't want to like more clunky, if you will.
yeah,
And what didn't help things, I think I can share this. What didn't help things, there were a couple spells that you couldn't actually cast because they caused issues, right? Um, so yeah, so due to lack of so they're basically like, yeah, you can go ahead and fire up the mage, but you can't use this, this, and this, basically,
yeah,
right? And it was
yeah,
like, ah, crap, and those were actually what I thought would be key and cool spells, especially in big fights, basically. So I was just like, screw
yeah?
it, yeah.
Was that the same way all the way in the last test? Were there still some skills that you couldn't were told not to use?
No, in the last test, see, I don't remember in the last test us being prohibited for it, and that's actually linking to something, not to spoil kind of what you had in terms of server stability, which I
Oh
saw
yeah,
was the next one. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
that's actually why I think the perception was that the server stability was worse because
Okay,
there seemed to be more things that you could press in this version that would screw things up if you weren't careful. And
okay,
so for that matter, it was kind of like, okay, let's dial it back. And then there were also now I can't say or I won't say it's not that I can't say I don't actually know why, but there were more like server restarts during the active testing than there were in the past ones. Like even in Alpha One, I see where they're coming from now. In Alpha One, I don't remember this many server restarts that were happening at the time.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's some people. There's been a little doom going about with the whole
Okay,
idea that A1 was more stable, in terms of networking and stuff. But I think they've just added so much to the game, and the upgrade to
yeah,
Unreal Engine 5 to me, maybe that's part of it as well, and just
yeah,
trying to work into that new system, that new ecosystem.
yeah,
But it sounds like they're making big progress with each test got quite a bit better.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
how did the combat feel overall? Do you think obviously it needs improvement because it's still
yeah,
pre-alpha 2, but
yeah. So I think the combat felt okay. I say okay because the the okay, so what I really like, let me explain what I really like in combat. It's smoothness,
Mhm.
right? So one of the reasons that I think, uh, even though it's a terrible PvP game, one of the games that I think sticks out as far as combat and fluidity is World of Warcraft.
Sure.
If you fire up WoW for like the first time, especially after you're coming from another MMO, it feels really smooth. Just
Mhm.
basically, just going around moving. I don't know why that is. All I know is, that's the case. Like it doesn't feel real clunky or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
Ashes is still in that kind of clunkiness phase, right? Now that said, I do remember a time when WoW felt clunky. So it's not that I don't
Sure.
think that they can get there. And actually, even a really good example, they got it to be somewhat smooth in the battle royale, but that was only X amount of people basically. But you get what I mean. Like there's a point that you can get to where moving around in the world and including combat starts to feel smooth, right?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
they're not there yet, right? So that was my kind of beef with it. That said, I did like where they're going with combos and with kind of chaining things together, and you can kind of see already right now how they're trying to emphasize group combat more, because a lot
Mhm.
of the skills are more group oriented, a lot where it felt more group oriented and kind of like chaining together type things. But yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah,
I know what you mean with WoW, and it's you press a button and it's responsive. Your
yeah,
movement's responsive. Everything works together. It's all very cohesive and responsive. And I think that's a difficult thing to get to during MMO development. It takes a lot of polish to get to that point.
yeah,
But I mean, I felt like Alpha One when I played it. It had a massive ways to go to get there. I thought it was okay, but
yeah.
it just needed so much more time, and we still need more time. But it just from watching it, it does look vastly improved from Alpha One to me.
Yeah.
But it's so much different when you actually play it. So I can't wait to actually get in there and play it. So I do have Alpha
Yeah.
One. So hopefully they have said Alpha One potentially soon, but they've said that before. So we'll see. But with Alpha Two coming up supposedly in quarter 3, it's got to be soon.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um,
did you get any time in nodes at all? And I don't know if you can talk about any of that, but did you see anything with nodes that was interesting, or is there anything that you're even allowed to talk about there?
I don't think we can talk about that just
Yeah.
yet. And I'm going to err on the side of caution on this one. I don't think we can talk about that just yet.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so I'll refrain on that. Sorry. Apologies.
Yep. Not a problem. Not a problem. And there was supposedly some people had said there's like some walls you couldn't go outside of certain areas. Were you just restricted to basically to the 2 nodes and then the war area? Was that the only thing you could you see outside the boundaries at all?
Oh, well, I don't think we were really restricted, to be perfectly honest. Like there were, uh, so there was there was kind of a restriction, but not the same way that I kind of saw. Okay, so let me explain. So when we were kind of going in and we get going, for the tests and stuff like that, typically you have a goal in mind of what you're going to do, and you can kind of see, like Steven and crew, they're all kind of like herding cats, doing what they need to do in order to get us to that stage. And so typically they'll be like, all right, you guys, we've got some NPCs that'll let you power up. You're gonna get equip what you want, start testing out your skills, and wait over here while we do what it is. Right? That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that we can't, kind of. And I've actually did that where we're kind of waiting off, but you don't want to wander off too far, because then if you do, then you're going to have to work with one of the reps and basically be like, hey man, I need to teleport, I don't know where the hell I'm going, or I don't know where the hell you guys went. That's the biggest thing, because if you're not there when they're about to move, because they'll often have you like in a staging area, and then they may use their GM skill to teleport you across the world, right?
Hmm.
So one of the times I did go running off, and I mean that's one of the things to their credit that I think Ashes is doing really well in, and that's the world looks beautiful, right?
Yeah.
You walk around in it, and even in the unpolished state that it is, it looks really fantastic, right? You can
Yeah.
kind of see that it's going really nice, and so I would do that, at times, but then I'd hear over Discord they'd be like, "Hey, all right, we're gonna go here. We're gonna move these guys here. And we're gonna teleport them." And you walk back to where you are, they're all gone, right? And it's like, "Hey, I missed my teleport. Where are you guys?" And then it's like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
So, but if it sounded like somebody else might have tried to wander as far, I saw the map. It's a pretty big area that they have you in, but if somebody walked to the end of it and tried to go off, maybe it is boxed off. And yeah, so
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Let me scroll through my questions here. Oh, here's this is one I asked Phantom when we did an interview with him. But when you traveled from the node to the node wars, what was the mob density like? Were there areas that felt empty, or did it feel like it was fully fleshed out as you traveled?
It didn't feel like it was fully fleshed out, but it was not empty.
Okay.
It was quite annoying actually on some parts where you're just
Yeah.
trying to run to where you need to go, and you've got these monsters that are hitting you, and that seemed pretty standard though. It did not seem empty to me. So yeah.
Yeah. Tanks. You did not play tank or cleric,
Oh,
but
one thing to
yeah.
mention in there: some mobs are more. At first, I thought it was maybe a problem with. Oh, okay. Let me give you an example. So you know how in WoW, like if you're just walking around, you can see the mob's health bar as you walk through.
Hmm.
I didn't really get that with Ashes of Creation. I think that's intentional. So a lot of these mobs would kind of like be hidden in grass, if you will, and
Yeah.
just kind of ambush you out of nowhere because you didn't see them properly, basically, and go through. So that was pretty cool. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember watching one of the streams. I think it might have been the Tumok stream where they had a spider that wouldn't aggro you. It kind of put its feet up and threaten you, right? So little things like that, I think, add a lot to an MMO. Just little small things like that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, did you play tank or cleric at all? You did not. You played mage and ranger. But
Mage and Ranger, yeah. But in
yeah,
the previous test, like in Alpha 1, I played a cleric, I think. Yeah.
yeah. Did you
Yeah.
in the PvP? Did you feel like the tanks or the clerics were doing just too much damage, considering their role is not really a damage role?
Uh, Not right now, no. So the strange problem is I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. So the team that I was on, we kept steamrolling the other team. So,
yeah,
so I didn't really get a good sense of. But and to be fair, I don't know if it's because Margaret gave us a buff or if that Margaret buff went through and we were kind of going back and forth. But either
yeah,
way, like it didn't. I didn't really get a chance to assess the other team and if they were you know I guess if like our tanks would kind of move up there, we'd kind of encircle them with like a pincher, and then we just start charging forward using our area skills, and then they would fall back and rinse and repeat a couple times in a
yeah,
couple of them. And so yeah, so I didn't really get the sense that I mean I didn't play the classes, but I didn't really get the sense that they were steamrolling because I was looking at the kills afterwards, and I had a good amount, and I was overhearing a couple of the other like ranger and like DPS classes. They had a good amount. I didn't hear any tanks or clerics be like, "Hey man, I got a ton of kills" and stuff like
yeah.
that. But yeah,
Good.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. That's good because in Alpha One, the cleric was doing too much damage for the amount of healing it could also put out. At least that's how I felt about it.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I'm glad to see true class identity, at least so far. But obviously, more balance is
yeah.
needed. Um, the tank taunt, did you see that at all when I was talking with Phantom? It sounded like the taunt did a debuff. So if you would taunt as a tank, you would
Hmm.
get a debuff that you would do reduced damage to everybody except the tank if you had the tank taunt on you. Did you ever have that happen to you or see that debuff?
Oh, interesting. I can't say that I did. I almost definitely got targeted by it, but to be honest, and maybe that's a thing for improvement because I found it, and that's yeah, I guess that's some feedback that I had. I found it kind of difficult to figure out when I was debuffed and where I was debuffed. Like
Yeah.
I play on a really big screen, and so my icons tend to be small basically against it, and so it was hard for me to figure out if I was debuffed or not. I think a couple times I like moused over and saw like a different little icon there, but um, yeah, I can't say that I did.
Yeah. Yeah, I always like when it's clear when you have a major debuff on you, and like an animation on your character model, something like that. I hate having to stare at debuff bars constantly to figure out what's going on. I know there's some of that has to happen because you can't have an animation for 10 different ailments on you, obviously. But like the major ones, like I think in the Fighter Showcase there was a bleed animation that was pretty extreme, but you definitely knew you had bleeding on you. So
Okay.
I like when you have something major on you like that. I do like to have a nice animation, so it's just 100% clear. And that's
I would
polish. That's all stuff that takes time to get to that point. But
for sure, I would consider the tank debuff a major. Like if you're doing 50% less to everyone else except one character.
Yes.
Like I need to know that basically.
I was glad to hear that because Warhammer Online, that's how tanks. They have basically two different taunts. I forget how the other one. I think the other one was some kind of a CC, but one of the taunts did exactly that. And I always thought Warhammer Online tanks were some of the best like PvP tanks. So I was really glad to see they're borrowing stuff from Warhammer Online, which I felt did tanking really well. Another one is the I always forget the name of it, what they call it in Ashes, but the line, it's like a guard ability, and it was called guard in Warhammer Online, and so I call it guard all the time in Ashes when I see it, but it's got a different name. But what that does is any damage the tank, when the tank puts that on a target, any damage that person takes, 50% of it goes to the tank instead. It's like a redirect.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so I thought that was an amazing ability in Warhammer Online as well. And it worked exactly the same. There was a line and there was a range. If you got out of the range, it would break. And it made tanks just so useful. And I'm glad to see they're basically copying the best, in my opinion, the best PvP tanks in MMOs ever, I think, were in Warhammer Online. And to an extent, Dark Age of Camelot as well, since it's the same game in many ways.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to check out tanks and actual tanks that actually work well in PvP, as it looks to me, anyways. I'm so up in the air on what I want to play first. I'm liking Mage right now. Every week it's different. I was Ranger one week, then I was Mage, and I'm Tank. But it's tough without actually seeing it. So, and I think everybody. For me, I'm one of those. I'll have to play pretty much all of them before I settle on one, I think. What kind of archetypes do you typically play in an MMO?
Usually a melee, quick hitting archetype. So I want to say assassin, but I hate sneak. So it's usually like a melee focused, DPS monkey, if you will.
Yeah.
So
fighter or rogue, maybe.
Yeah, like fighter or rogue. So fighter with like two hand. I mean it's either two hand spec or two hand sword spec basically. But yeah, something that's requires you to stick on them and be up close and personal, if you will. So yeah.
Got a question from chat. Kind of a specific question. Can you equip a shield on the Ranger as a secondary weapon and hot swap during combat just for a little more tankiness in case of an ensuing CC?
I'm not sure about hot swapping, but you can definitely equip like there were no restrictions in terms of what weapon you could use. So you could buy whatever you wanted and then equip whatever you wanted for that. So I didn't see any restriction on that. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they allow you to hot swap though.
Yeah. They're going with the arcade system where everybody can use every weapon, so it'll make for some very interesting combos for sure. Especially with active blocking on the shield. With that, with every class having the potential to be able to do that, it creates some interesting dynamics. I can't wait to see some of the crazy builds that people come up with the augment system is crazy, obviously, and the skill trees look pretty good in terms of how much you can do with them. And then everybody can wear any weapon or any armor type. So there's so much customization that It's going to be interesting. The build diversity should be very interesting. Now, you would think arcades had kind of the same stuff. Like you could wear all the armors, you could wear all the
Yeah.
weapons, but people there was like 6 classes. They had 250 some classes, and there was like 6 that people played. you know,
Yeah, yeah.
so
There
I
is, yeah.
hope it doesn't end up being like that in Ashes as well, where it's
People
like
figured out the meta. Yeah.
yeah, people meta it to an extreme, and then there's no diversity at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that can definitely
Um,
happen.
but that'll be interesting. Yeah, because yeah, that's more of a function though of how they truly, try and implement these classes, right? If you I think the fact that there were a good example that you just gave, the fact that there were like 6 classes that people focused in on is more a reflection of poor design, unfortunately, right?
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Uh, so we'll see how they. I am positive though that they're focusing on balancing it around group combat. I am worried around it as well too, but the fact that they're trying to balance around group combat does lend to the fact that there will be more classes that are viable, more combos that are viable, but it
yeah,
also means that there potentially can be some insane just one-on-one wrecking machines if you're not careful. So, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, balancing around groups it's interesting. I've always wondered like the group size is 8, so that's. I mean, are they assuming that there's one of each archetype in each group, and that's how they're balancing it? Because yeah, it's interesting how that's going to work. But there's going to be.
I,
I really feel like there's just going to be huge imbalances with all the diversity that there is.
oh yeah. Um, I would imagine though that they balance it around almost like type or thing that you're doing and assigning pointers to it. So it's like, you know, um, area effect versus buffs versus debuffs versus what's the extremity of it. You kind of start grouping things together by them, and you start assigning them to different toolkits, if you will, and
Yeah,
maybe that's how they're going to balance it, where it's across that. Okay, we gave you 5 points worth, we gave you 5 points worth. You're all balanced because you can do the. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how they do it, but I would imagine it'd be something like that. So.
yeah. Um, with CC, there's no diminishing returns yet. Was how bad was CC with no diminishing returns?
Uh, I don't remember it being that bad, to be honest. Now that said, our healers really wiped out. At least from my perspective, just because our healers on our team did a really good job of keeping us alive, so we were free to do pretty much whatever the heck we wanted. So I honestly I wasn't really even paying attention to the CC because, yeah, again, we were just uh for better or for worse, we were just doing really well against the other team. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I heard about. You were Winstead, right? Yeah, I heard Winstead just
yeah,
kind of dominated every test. so,
yeah.
um, did you see a castle? I know you probably haven't, but I'm curious if castles are in. When you were looked around as you were running towards the nodes, did you ever see a castle by chance?
Did I notice? One doesn't stick out,
Yeah,
honestly. No, I did not. We noticed ruins, but not a castle.
yeah.
Yeah, ruins, but no castle. Yeah.
Do you think we're on track for quarter 3 still?
uh, uh, I think. You know what? I think so.
yeah,
I think, however, I'd be curious to see what the scope of the test is going to be.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Because you can fire off any test that you want and just say that you're testing X Y Z and maybe not being as expansive as you originally intended. So I still think we're gonna have an Alpha 2 test at the time. I think Q3 by Q3, but I would temper expectation in terms of what we're actually going to test. Right?
yeah,
Um, yeah, I think that's it. I'll be very curious to kind of see where they're going with, because I'm not sure with the recent addition how well the server would hold up for it.
mhm,
And in my opinion, before they get this into the hands of more people, they really have to do more. Um, and I know it's not their focus, but they need to do more fidelity and just like beautification, like of the UI, specifically the UI, is what I'm going through because the presentation makes a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I know that's not their focus, and it's not at least in. I mean, fully important to like the end of the server development that they're doing, but yeah, personally, I think it's really important, and they definitely should do that. But we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go back to something I've had on my mind since one of the first things you talked about was you had a group of friends that you went with from MMO to MMO. Do you still keep in contact with a lot of your original MMO
Nah.
gamer friends? Or because I didn't keep in contact with most of them, and I regret that. But
Yeah. I'd say, not as much as I wanted to. Probably like 25% of them
yeah,
we do keep in contact with. Because, I mean, for lack of, I mean, we grew up together. Since 16 years, I'm 43 now. Since I've known a lot of these guys since I was 16, right? And, um, so we've been around, but the biggest thing is, lives
yeah,
change, right?
yeah,
People have kids, people, change job, people move on. So, I'd say about 25% of them, but even then we're not like in the same guild or anything like that. Like we all have different likes and dislikes and things like that. But, we're all kind of looking forward to Ashes and we're seeing if, that's going to be the one. So, yeah.
Well, if you guys need a group, I do run a guild called Genesis. So if you need a group, we're definitely recruiting, and we'd love to have
All right.
some. We're all older. I mean, I'm 42. I think the majority of us are all up there. I mean, with most people are actually probably almost a majority are older than me even. So
Oh, cool, cool.
it's but that's how MMO players are these days. Everybody's old. So.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
Ashes? What do you think long term for Ashes in terms of? Do you think it's going to be more of a niche style game? Do you think it'll have mass appeal? That's always a big debate amongst a lot of people. Do you think the systems in it are they're not casual friendly enough, or it's a bit too hardcore in some aspects?
Man, so that's a great question. That's the biggest reason to be honest, that's one of the reasons that I actually stopped doing like podcasts and videos and content basically, right? Because I found myself coming to an area where I was like, I am very much of the generation where if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all,
Mm,
right? And I didn't want to become too critical. It's not that I was critical in terms of what they're doing, more critical in terms of some of the pitfalls that we're going to have to watch out for, right? Because
yeah,
what they're doing is hard, right? And specifically the question that you just brought up, which is, hey, is it too much, is it too PvP focused? Like one of the things that I hear people say is there's got to be consequences and penalties. That's all fine and good, but you don't want too much consequences and penalties to the point where you drive away whoever's playing, right? At the end of the day, this is a game, right? And
yeah,
finding that sweet balance between, you know, penalty so that you don't do crazy, stupid crap, but at the same time, you keep wanting to play the game. Like that's going to be their challenge. Like that's the real challenge that Ashes has within this realm. Because to give a good example, Shadowbane, that was a game that we saw collapse largely because they couldn't do this properly. Like
mm,
you would have one guild steamroll everyone, right, and be absolutely, what would happen is you would start off with like say 30 guilds, and then you would watch them either be devoured or just absolutely wrecked over
yeah,
time. And if you log in and you're getting wrecked day in, day out, there's no real benefit. Well, why the heck are you going to keep playing, right? And
yeah.
so that question, I'm really curious to see how they're going to answer. And I've been largely silent, just waiting to see kind of what that balance is like when we get to it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the biggest questions until we see the systems with players in them, and see how it actually works. But the problem is Alpha 2 players are all dedicated, some probably more hardcore than average if you're paying that kind of money. So I don't know if that's a true representation. We may not know until launch, and you get the actual regular players in there that aren't willing to shell out that kind of money, and we'll see. We'll see then. But that's every MMO's got to answer that question. You do have to cater to the casual crowd to a degree. And will Ashes be able to answer that? We'll see. I mean, I definitely don't want it to be just a Albion Online or EVE Online like niche, as some people keep telling me to say. I don't want people to I don't want it to be like that. I don't want it to be 10,000, players in the entire game. I mean, I don't think with the node system, like it would work with having that few players. So they really do need a healthy player base. So they've got to nail that. And I mean, they've said a lot of things, and it's just hard to say until we see it. So with those actual players in there.
That's a great point. I mean,
and as Phantom said, the PvEers as well. Like Arcade, that was one of the things with Arcade to me. That was one of the reasons I think it failed. Is the PvE in Arcade was just, I misspelled your name on the Nightbot, so I'm looking at that. But the PvE was just not up to par. I felt like a lot of the bosses were just damage sponges, not a lot of mechanics. And when you have open world bosses, I think it's hard to make them super technically challenging, but you still have to have good PvE, even if you're more of a PvP focused game. And so I'm hopeful that they can figure that out. The little bit we've seen, it looks okay, but there's so much we haven't seen yet on the PvE side. So I don't have a whole lot of other questions. I guess, is there anything else you would want to talk about before we kind of wrap this up? I've gone through a lot of these questions at the end here are just kind of fluff questions that I had just in case we ran out of things to talk about. But anything else you want to talk about? Is there anything you're excited for with Ashes that we never got a chance to go over?
I think so. The part that I'm excited for, we still don't. I still can't really, go into or it's not that I can't go into it, but I really want to see this node system in its entirety, like in action, right? With specifically the player base, because I understand the dream that they're going towards, but I really want to see, to your point, I want to see the casuals in there with, the PvP. Let's see the harmony that we can create or not create and see if it's going to work, right? Because just over time, I guess you could say, look, like I've sunk over, 10 grand into this game, right? So I want it to succeed from my perspective. So don't take my words as if I'm a hater or anything like that. I want this to succeed desperately. Like this is what I want that feeling when I played Ultima Online there. Over time, though, I'm starting to realize how much more difficult. This is much more difficult than I originally even thought. Right? I kind of came into it with starry eyes, and now as I'm kind of sitting down and thinking as they're going through, it's not the technical things that they're working on that I think is the real challenge. It's what comes next after they solve the technical issue that's going to be the real challenge. So I'm still optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm just in a mode of, all right, let's see what you got. I'm not going to rush you guys. Take all the time that you need, and we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah. So. Have you ever backed a game to the degree of Ashes, or not? Maybe not that much, but this is the first game you ever really backed, like a Kickstarter, huh?
Yeah, like a Kickstarter. It's because the way that I put it and the way that I justified it is I want it to succeed.
Yeah.
Right. That's my whole thing. I want it to succeed. No if ands or buts, and so whatever I feel that I can do to help is what I'm going to do. In some cases, it's keeping my mouth shut because I don't think it's being positive. In other cases, it's doing what I can here. But overall, no, I haven't. Not to this degree. There's
So there was something you definitely saw about this one. Do you think there's a lot of people that think if this fails, they're just done with MMOs. Are you one of those? You're done with MMOs if Ashes fails?
You know, I'm not going to say that I'm done with MMOs. MMO till death is basically what I have.
Yeah,
So whatever's
yeah,
out there, I'm going to kind of play. Now that said, a little part of me will have died inside because I am still holding on to that, that game that, got me. There still is no other game that's gotten me more excited than Ashes has in its kind of, you know, um, in its true representation of what it could be.
yeah,
And so, yeah, so I'll be extremely disappointed, but I won't stop MMOs. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Somebody asked a question in chat. How long would be too long for this game to come out? Basically, is the question. It's kind of a
Oh,
long
shit.
question.
How long would be too long? Man, well, we've already gone through 2 iterations of PCs that I bought for a top of the line Ashes rig at
Yeah,
this point. Um, I would say, like maybe that's a really good question. I would say like maybe 4 more years would be too long.
yeah,
Um, yeah, because at that point you start getting into because what's going to start happening uh, is the longer it takes, like past, normal like development, the more expectations are going to be heaped on what it should be.
sure.
Like you can't be, taking 10 years to release a game or whatever. You come out with that game and it's a buggy mess and it has, these sort of problems. Like the longer that it takes, the more polished it's going to have to be, like to the point where, it's pristine by the time it comes out, or else,
Yeah,
it's going to get hammered basically.
yeah.
So, yeah.
When's the next Alpha Soul YouTube video?
Uh, uh, I would say not to expect anything until we're in a solid beta. I would
Yeah,
say basically. Well,
gotcha.
you know what? Actually, to put it another way, until I can talk to the fact, until I can talk to balance,
Yeah,
that's when not to expect the
yeah.
as soon as I can start talking about balance and the actual, hey, this is how we're putting forward it, and I can actually talk about that. That's when I'll start putting out videos, basically. So.
So would that be like kind of the focus you're wanting to go for? Would be like class discussion and maybe builds and balance. That's kind of what you were planning to do.
Yeah, it was that. Well, that was actually supposed to be more the filler content. I actually wanted to start talking about like world politics and news. Like
Yeah,
my whole spin that I wanted to come at it was from a news perspective. Like this is what's going on within the world here, blah, blah. Yeah, but I
yeah.
wanted to include like more of a spin. But yeah, so
Cool. Well, we'll wait for that in like 3 or 4 years from now.
yeah,
However long that's going to take, that's probably going to be at least a couple years would be my guess before we get into the betas. But how long
yeah.
do you think it is before launch? I know I told you I was going to wrap up, and I keep coming up
Yeah.
with new questions. But
No. It's
yeah,
these are all good questions. I've been woefully wrong on this question so many times at
yeah,
this
I
point
have
now.
to. Yep, yep.
So, uh, yeah, I'd say at the pace that we're going, 3 years.
Okay. Yeah,
I would say 3 years at this
yeah,
point. 2 if we're lucky. But the fact that we're still in alpha at this point, you know,
yeah.
then yeah.
It's taken a while.
So
It's been a
I'll
while.
say, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. They have a much bigger team now, so my hope is that they can ramp up. But I feel like they've got to get one area of the map kind of fleshed out, and then they can not copy paste, but you know what I mean. The next
yeah,
areas will be a lot faster, I think, hopefully.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but also, I don't know that they have much done yet. So I feel like there's a lot left to do, but we're getting there. We're
yeah,
getting there, and luckily for Ashes and Intrepid, there isn't a lot of other MMOs that are looking super promising at the moment that are on the horizon. So I think they have time.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really all I have. I really enjoy talking to you. I remember watching your videos, and you were very analytical, and I enjoyed watching them back in the day. And it's like, man, I was watching the Node Wars live on stream here, and I was like, man, Alpha Soul, I remember that, and I looked it up. It's, oh yeah, he made YouTube, and so I had to reach out, and I'm glad I reached out, and I'm glad you said yes, and we'll have to maybe do it again sometime. Yeah, I'll have to get you on again sometime so that, you know, in between now and the 2 to 3 years before you start making videos again, people can see your face again.
Yeah, nice.
Yep.
Awesome.
Alrighty. Well, I am going to raid a guy by the name of Storyteller, who is a friend of mine that is trying to get Twitch affiliate, and he's extremely close. So I need basically everybody to hit follow over there, and if you hit follow, he'll get Twitch affiliate, because that's all he needs is followers. So I'm going to get that raid set up. His name is Storyteller. And where is he on this list? Thank you for the follows, everybody. Look at this typed in. He's got kind of a weird, he's got AOC at, hey, thanks for the follow, everybody. Yes, and follow Alpha as well. Follow Alpha Soul. And I've lost. There we go. I'm back. I accidentally clicked out of that window. So, all right, the raid is created. We've got 26 people ready to go over there. Yeah, and if everybody would follow that goes over there, that should get him his affiliate. So we'll see you guys. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Take care.
All right.